Hey guys, it's time for philosophical rambling number 5. I'm hoping to get number 6 either on Monday or Sunday. Sunday or Monday. I'm not too behind on my notes. I already have philosophical rambling number 6 and 7 figured out, and that will pretty much finish Nietzsche, and then I'll probably get more into de Beauvoir, Simone de Beauvoir, uh, one of the first, well, one of the most well-known feminists, and she's also an existentialist theorist. Um, so I'll get onto her eventually. Good choice of words. Um, so in this video, I want to talk about Plato's theory and recollection very briefly. Morality from culture, whether we get it from there or not. How does that happen, etc. How do you know ethics, morality is any good to begin with? Is Kant, that is Immanuel Kant, the Prussian philosopher, after the full truth? Commander versus herd mentality, and a society of experts, whether it's wanted, needed, useful, whether we should have it, whether we should want it, etc., etc. So first I want to start on Plato's theory on recollection, and I'm talking about this. I know this seems kind of left field from stuff I've been talking about. Not that all my stuff is very focused, but um, this looks especially off the wall because I'm kind of getting more and more modern, but all of a sudden I'm retracing the philosophical steps back to Plato. But that's because we a few weeks ago. All these entries, by the way, will be from 3/16/11. Um, we A philosophy club meeting happened, and we talked about Plato's theory and recollection. So I wrote that down as a thing to talk about on a rambling. And basically, his theory and recollection is that we're not born with any inherent. We are born with all this inherent knowledge about the world, but we forget it when we're born, or we forget it through time, and then we learn it again. It's something like this, and that also goes along with his theory about forms, the ideal of forms, in that everything has its own form, and everything has its own unique form. Basically, we reached the conclusion that in philosophy club, or at least a few of us did, that the idea of forms wasn't very practical and didn't make much sense. If everything had its own unique form, it wouldn't be very practical to call, you know, a desk and a chair, or we were talking about desks and chairs and how much difference they really had in a desk and a table. And if everything had its own unique form, it'd just be very impractical. Um, and I don't really buy his theory and recollection anyway. And note, I'm not giving a comprehensive look at it. I'm just kind of mentioning what I remember from it. I'm not looking it up or anything. So if you want know more about it, don't knock it off, right off the bat. Look it up, go research it. I'm just giving what I remember. So, my memory's obviously a little bit foggy. This was a few weeks ago. Morality from culture. Nietzsche was raising the point, I believe, that we get a lot of the morality, or a lot of the ideas of morality that we have from our culture. For instance, he talked that Mill's utilitarianism was really just what English people thought was good morality, and he wanted everybody to have that kind of good morality. Um, and the categorical imperative that Kant had, he liked strict rules, and people in Prussia liked strict rules, so the universality made more sense. For Aristotle, he liked this idea of golden mean because he implemented it in his life, so he felt others should as well. So it's obvious from all these examples that Nietzsche draws out that yes, we do get morality from our culture. Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, in Existentialism is a Humanism, talks about how one of the few uncontrollable things in our lives is culture, and that it influences our lives. It's not completely uncontrollable, but it's uncontrollable to the extent that we don't have as much control over it as we do normally in our lives. So it does seem to me that culture does have a big effect on our morality and how we see things. Also, the way we live our lives, the way our lives have transpired. I know I'm basically an anarchist and atheist, psychologically you could say, because the government really has never done me any good. I've never really seen it do any good. I have a lot of friends who are troubled, who are like low in income, and who have never really made it that far in life. Government doesn't really seem to be able to help them. Government has never really helped me. I've only heard people praise its efforts. I've never really seen its effort been done in vain. All the all the interactions that I've had with government officials and government people have been sketchy to say the least, and threatening and not and off-putting to say the worst. I was never a big fan of school. I always did well in it, but I was never really a big fan of it, or I wasn't. At least I was more interested in my friends than school, which typically people are. Most kids don't really like school in general, which is good, but they don't realize why they don't like it. So I mean, I get a lot of my morality from my upbringing. I'm an atheist because you could say I'm an atheist because my mom was always indifferent to religion. My grandmother never really pushed it. I never really went to church. I never read the Bible. I never really saw any need for God or anything like that. I never asked for his help. I never saw anyone I loved ask for his help. I never saw anything necessary for it. I always had this kind of independent spirit about me. I never thought I really needed anyone else besides myself or besides my close friends or people I could trust to help me get through life. So I've had, kind of an odd upbringing, but as far as viewpoints are concerned, my mother was always indifferent, apathetic to politics. She never really cared. My grandmother was a Democrat, but I'm not going to get. This is all very tangible, but I just want to make Nietzsche's point more clear that obviously the way you're brought up, the culture that you're in, the environment has a lot of effect on the morality that you have. Whether that's useful or not, I'm not sure. It depends on the culture and the environment, but he's definitely on the mark here, I think. How do you know ethics or morality is any good? This is the question that Nietzsche asks in Beyond Good and Evil. Pretty, he asked it a few times, I think, but I distinctly remember him asking it pretty early on. So how do we know ethics and morality are any good? Well, again, I'm gonna take. I've been reading a thing by Exomniverse, and he's Sean Huckabee on Facebook, and he's been talking about epistemological pragmatism and how basically that goes along with morality and ethics. And he was just talking about how ethics and morality are just practical. They're just very useful for our lives, and they're not necessarily moral, but like I said before, I think they definitely can be moral. They have some moral content to them. They have to, I would say. But first and foremost, they're practical, useful to ourselves, and then other people come after. And that kind of brings in my sort of egoistic tendencies, or to see the individual self-interest have a lot to do with morality and ethics. So Nietzsche asks, is Immanuel Kant really after the full truth? Is he really after, I don't remember the whole context of this, of course, but he asks, is he really after, the greatest truth, the greatest universal truth, or does he just want his life, perhaps going again to epistemological pragmatism, maybe he just wants his life to be more practical, more easier to get along with, easier to manage, and so on and so forth. And obviously I think that's partly the case. But, is he really after a universal truth? Is there a universal truth? I don't know. It's interesting to see whether philosophers are actually after the full truth, or they just want things to be easier in their lives. I think a lot of what philosophers talk about have to do with their lives, and again, going back to culture, morality, and that kind of stuff. It's interesting not only to ask if Kant is after the full truth, but if philosophers are after the full truth in general. I'm not sure how to answer that, but I do want to move on. I got two more subjects to go on with. And commander versus herd mentality. This is one of the biggest concepts, or not one of the biggest, but probably one of the most widely known concepts that Nietzsche uses, besides maybe the superhuman, which is another concept. You can look that up if you want. I may link it in the description, maybe not, I don't know. But there I go saying somebody complained about me saying I say a lot. So, commander versus herd mentality. Basically, the commanders are the people on top who are seen as dangerous, who are seen as leaders, who are seen as people who lead the way. The herd basically have a collective sort of self. They're much more cautious. They're much more group orientated. And it's this kind of dichotomy between people who are considered dangerous and people who are cautious, and people who, get respect through force, and people who deserve respect, like the commanders. Um, and this is in Nietzsche's view. Um, so I'm not sure how much credibility the commander versus herd mentality actually has. I think it's an interesting viewpoint. I think it does have some truth to it, certainly. If there is one prevailing notion in America, it is probably herd mentality instead of commander. But if I was to put my own anarchist spin on it, I think everybody should be their own commander. And you should only have herd mentality if you're going to, have that mentality peacefully and have it in a voluntary manner. I think there's a lot more. I think there's a good strong possibility, just like a lot of left-wing anarchists and libertarians say, namely because I am both. Well, sort of. I consider myself an anarchist without adjectives first, but before I go too much into politics, I just want to say that to put my own anarchist spin on it, and to go back into politics actually a little bit, I just don't want to get too far into it because it's not really the point. I would want everyone to be their own commander and only have herds, insofar as they can have these herds peacefully and voluntarily. Now, I think, like I was trying to say before, I think the herds that there should be more of an ethical analysis than just whether something's voluntary and peaceful. But those should be the two main criteria. Nietzsche kind of thinks that there should be, well, he thinks a mix of moralities is best. But one is left wondering whether a society of experts or a society of commanders or scientists or whatever, whether science will save the day, something like this. And I don't really think a society of experts would do us any good. I think the whole idea of government itself is basically people who are more knowledgeable, more ethical, more moral than us. Ethical, moral are more or less the same thing. But I mean, I guess you could trade around. But anyway, the way people look at government officials is just to see them as these kind of angels, or to see them as these people who always have their backs, are always going to look out for them, always going to do this, always going to do that. But the reality of it is that, the society of people who are supposed to help you out, who are supposed to relieve you when you're in need, makes you really dependent. It really fostered a dependent spirit. And I'm not saying spirit religiously, I mean just like a sort of emotion or a sort of feeling. You just become, in your actions, you just become very dependent, very unequal in what you do in your life, in the matter of authority. A lot less authority comes from you and comes from instead government. So a society of experts, I mean, central planning doesn't really seem to work out. It didn't work out for the USSR. It doesn't work out for governments. The whole FDR and New Deals program really didn't help out the minorities that much. It just gave the government more power and gave the elites more money. And I mean, I was reading this textbook well, I'm not going to point to it. It's kind of off screen, and it'd take like a minute. Well, it'd be more trouble than it's worth. But I was reading this textbook, and it was actually blatantly saying, that most reform for African Americans, for Mexicans, for the lowest of the low was really modest at best. And even when they did something, generally it didn't help. These people aren't really as bright or as ethical as people want them to think. So I don't think a society of experts would really help. And I think if you're an anarchist or libertarian, you'd really have to naturally reject such a notion. All right, so just a little heads up. Like I said, Sunday or Monday should be Philosophical Rambling number 6. I should be finishing up with Nietzsche. Well, I'll finish it up with him on number 7, and then Wednesday should be. Wednesday, should be Take the Power Back by Rage Against the Machine. Alright, so another Rage Against the Machine song for you Rage fans. Alright, I'm actually going to test if I can go over 15 minutes because I haven't done that yet. And even if it does and I'm still talking whatever, it's not a big deal because I've already finished my main video. So, how about that local sports team? Yeah. Oh, also, just to mention, the New York City Anarchist Bookfair is coming up next week. So I encourage all anarchists within the East Bay area to attend it, or even if you're in the West. I mean, wherever you're from, you're an anarchist, you're a libertarian, come to the NYC Bookfair. It's going to be next Friday, Saturday, and I think Sunday. All right, so I will see you guys.